It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Rob here in the lair of Omnisci for my State of the Dungeon address for the game that took place on February 11th, 2021. The game was Mighty Protectors. Not all players were in attendance. The player of Rook was not able to make it due to transportation issues, and the player of Muscles is still unfortunately unable to get away from his employment obligations and therefore can't come play. So we missed them both, and we settled in for a fun, thrilling night in the Republic of Georgia. Now, when we last left the heroes, they had gone through a thrill ride of traveling to Georgia, and there they met up with Mr. Hank DeVille, who appears very much to be a devil with the whole tail, red skin look, and seems to be a fairly powerful gifted, and he joined up with their group. He seemed like a decent enough guy, although nobody trusts him. Fun. And he traveled along with them. They purloined 3 battle suits from Smash that they defeated the wearers of, and fixed them up to the point where 3 of them are in operation. One is in excellent shape, which is being piloted by Doorman. One is in decent shape. Pretty much most of its systems are online, and that one's being run by Mr. DeVille. And one is basically functional, but a lot of it is pretty chewed up, and that one's being piloted by Sentinel. The other 3 members of the group can fly, of course. Now, the group missed Rook almost immediately because his ability to sense communications and blanket the same really could have come in handy numerous times in this adventure. So they're learning to get by without relying on any one person overly much, and this was a penetration effort to get into the Smash stronghold north of the capital of the Republic of Georgia. So the group got within visual of it through flight and then landed, got into a secluded area. And they saw that the city was sprawled out below them from the height that they were on. And as they were looking, they saw that the fortress that they had built was this big, ugly metal structure overlooking the city. It rose hundreds of feet into the air. It was very large, about the size of a Super Plus arena. And it had numerous launch bays for their battle suits and whatever else they had. There were numerous defensive gun positions around it. It looked like a tough nut to crack, especially if you don't have superpowers, which the group has. And 3 battle suits, which the group also has. Now, the players have to be given credit for they were smart enough to realize the moment they took those battle suits, those things were going to be immediately listed as negative assets by the Smash folks, and therefore just walking up probably wasn't going to go very well. They might be able to blend in on visual, but as far as being treated as if they belong there probably wasn't going to work. So they didn't push that narrative too far. Instead, they realized that their best bet was probably to drop inside the base, and to do that using Doorman's gift for creating doors between 2 spaces and getting them from cover to the base. To do that, they needed some intel. So to do that, they wanted first to send Cygos in astral form to go and reconnoiter. It is what her powers are ideal for. But as she was flying across, she found something. Around the base of the fortress are these large searchlights. And when she was in astral form and flying, she felt that she was very sensitive to the lights. They bothered her. They seemed brighter in astral space, whereas most things that are purely physical are faded to her appearance. It's harder to see them a little bit. In this case, they were even stronger and more verdant. So she attempted to get around them, but she didn't succeed. One of them tagged her leg, and basically knocked her out of astral, yanked her back along her silver cord back to her body. And the base was put on alert. They saw patrols suddenly scrambling to fly around and do pattern reconnoitering, as well as combing the area where she had been. Smash has tricks to avoid just what she was trying to do. They were really, what they really wanted to do was make sure that the interior of the place wasn't covered by force fields, which would possibly stop teleportation through, or it might stop astral travel. It might stop Bulwark, who is able to now go intangible. So she didn't get close enough to test that theory. So instead what they did was they land crawled stealthily, sort of. Battle suits aren't very stealthy. To within range of Doorman's power. And he was determined that he could put them into one of the launching bays. The only problem with this is that while Doorman has a pretty potent power, which opens up all sorts of doors, pun intended, well, he's only a guy, and his control isn't the best. So what he intended to put them in was a launching bag, kind of a hangar for the battle suits, and instead what he ended up putting them into was on top of the roof, 20 feet above the roof to be specific. So when Sentinel walked through, he started falling. Now, Sentinel's reactions, of course, are amazing, and he was able to touch down using his skill with the battle suits that he's already gotten to land just fine, and then prepare himself in case anybody else botched their landing. Mr. DeVille went through, touchdown no problem. And Ghost, of course, could fly, so she went through, no problem. Bulwark went through, no problem. Doorman himself fell, because he's still kind of a dork. So he was caught, and it was muffled up well enough that nobody came and sounded an alarm. Now they were on top of the fortress, which is not ideally where they wanted to go. They still weren't inside the defenses. They were outside the perimeter defenses, though, which was helpful. But they couldn't stay there forever. They were going to get noticed, even though a couple of guards had walked by them. One of the most interesting things about the session, the dice gods were turned against everybody. Everybody was rolling poorly. Poor Bulwark's character was just rolling nothing but 17s and 18s, which in this game isn't good. In Dungeons & Dragons, they would have rolled anything, but in this game, they were having problems. I was rolling poorly. Cyghost was rolling poorly. Sentinel was rolling not great. He was rolling decently to do stuff, but when he actually had to roll damage and things, they were almost always on the lower end of the damage scale. So this made the night interesting, but more funny than anything. So the group, now at least they were at the site, and they were determined they were going to, get in from this point. At this point, they turned to some of their newfound powers, primarily Bulwark's intangibility. He's practiced it to the point where it doesn't cripple him with a massive cost of power to do it. It's taxing, yes, but he can go intangible and do all kinds of shenanigans now. So he went and phased through the roof. There was no force field preventing him from doing that. This actually happened when he stepped out of the gate, and he was dropping. He was intangible. Didn't hurt, but he fell through several floors. Eventually, he did hit a force field. One of the floors inside, sandwiched in the center of the base, was actually shielded by force field. He could not penetrate that. So instead, he was at a communications center at one point. He also went through a barracks, and then finally the top level was warehouse and receiving. So he managed to go through there, because he can fly while he's intangible, so it's not like he's, doomed to just sink to the center of the earth. So he flew up and found a spot where he could hide himself, because he's still visible when he's intangible. This was a problem, because his stealth, despite the fact that he had all these advantages, he was rolling so terribly that every room he went into, somebody saw him. An interesting thing he learned, though. By this reaction people had, he found out that there were ghosts that people were seeing. One of the things they had learned when Cyghost was intangible, because she was in astral space, she saw that there were a lot of ghostly activity, which she could see in the astral space, below the fortress. It's like it's built on a mass grave. And they were all kind of squicked out by that. You know, there's dark shadows from the time that the Soviets had controlled Georgia and the like. And so that was kind of creepy for them. But they found out that, yeah, ghosts are not an uncommon presence, and it really creeps out a lot of the staff. Most of the military people are a little bit more hardened to it, and actually some of the military folks have energy weapons now. So the officers seem to have energy pistols of some sort. So when Sygos popped up in, for example, the barracks, he came into an officer's room, and while two of the guys had conventional weapons and fired some shots at him that did nothing, the commanding officer fired an energy weapon, which certainly might have hurt Bulwark, but the guy missed. I rolled a 20 for him again. And he actually injured his arm, quick snap firing. So, yeah, that went around for everybody. It was hilarious. But Bulwark eventually got up to a secluded place in the warehousing area, found a nice shadowy area, and realized this is where ideally the group could get into. He figured out that their best way of getting in was by going through one of the various hatches, basically so that personnel could go up without having to use the various cargo lifts. The problem being he rolled badly for his intelligence to orient himself in relation to where the party was. Again. So they garbled his orders into thinking that he wanted them to go through a cargo elevator. However, because the alarms had been sounded and everybody's eyes were on the outside looking for intruders, that actually worked out all right, and the fact they had battle suits on site allowed them to get to the cargo elevator without arousing too much suspicion, which was good. And they were able to reunite. Now, while this was going on, Bulwark did get a sign that these folks from SMASH, who were the occupiers of Georgia, they had easily rolled over their mundane defenses with all their super high-tech stuff in their battle suits, and basically just popped up, took their government. Just said, we're in control now. Anybody who doesn't like it can eat the Gatling gun. So, as a result, they are a brutal totalitarian regime to suffer under. And this was evidenced by the fact that one poor guy saw Bulwark, was scared because he thought it was a ghost, and got gunned down brutally by the SMASH guards. At every step of the way, these SMASH guys are not supposed to be cuddly, and they're not. So, once they got inside, they used the battle suits to move some of the stock into a dead end so that they were nested safely from passing patrols. And at this point, they're like, okay, we'll let Bulwark run around through and find us where we need to go, and when he finds someplace that we want to go, he can allow Doorman to open up a door, because they can see each other through their visual cameras in the suits. He can find this location, open a door, we can all join in when we're someplace a little more sensitive, rather than having the whole group traipse through. This is them intelligently using their powers, stacking synergies, one person's skill on top of another, and it's really what the core of a successful supergroup is. And they're executing very well. I'm very proud of this group. So by taking Doorman, it drastically changes their entire plan and allows them to succeed at some sort of a stealth operation, despite the fact that most of them don't have fantastic stealth abilities. But this is actually working fairly well, even though they don't have Rook blanketing out all the communications and causing discord and mayhem. So, who knows? This could work out right? Well, okay. So, again, they rest for just a little bit while Bulwark goes intangible again and sinks down into the floor. This time he starts exploring around the different levels rather than just dropping through at random. He finds a central power area, which almost costs him running into it, because walking through power lines while intangible still isn't a fun experience. But he finds a central nexus of all this power being diverted in the floor directly above the area that is warded. And he realizes this probably is the control area for the force field and the different power. His idea for shutting down this base is to cause an electrical overload, a surge that'll blow everything out. Maybe he's forgetting how surge protectors work, but, you know, at least it'll stop things, so that's what he's shooting for. So he finds this place, and he's explored around a few other rooms. At one point, they thought they would bivouac inside of an officer's quarters and take his personal computer, but again, traveling with sensitive things like this, this computer equipment really wouldn't work out. So they kept going. Well, when he found this Nexus Power Center, he decided this would be a great place to sabotage. So he directed Doorman to open a door. Sentinel pulled a grenade, threw it in. To minimal damage. Not truly minimal, but not enough to do significant damage in the unspecified manner that it had. So it did minor cosmetic damage to the room, but nothing serious. And they didn't pursue that any further. Bulwark eventually said, you know what, I'm just going to go tangible, start flipping switches. The problem was he rolled a natural 20 on his electrical engineering to find the key center to shut it down, and instead there was because this place doesn't follow proper electrical regulations and everything, there was a live trunk that basically they have devices that can slot directly in and tap power directly from the grid. Not something you should touch, but this is an OSHA here, so they didn't have warning labels or anything. Most people just know not to touch it, and if you touch it, you're probably gonna die. Well, he didn't die. He touched it and got fried really good. He is badly hurt right now, but he's still alive and still conscious, and even though he's got a little bit of a tick from the jolt that went through him, he threw himself free and isn't a blackened skeleton, which is good. Then he just went through and started tripping everything else one after the other. It wasn't as neat, but it did successfully shut down the power to the force field below. He was correct. The power was actually routed above so that it couldn't be targeted from below, as most people would understand that some sort of power supply like that would be. So he was able to go down a level, which is the battlesuit manufacturing area. Now, rather than being in a big factory or anything, it's actually a relatively small self-contained unit. They just feed in the parts and this system puts everything together. Way beyond current manufacturing tech. This isn't just robots doing the work. This is extremely advanced stuff. This is the kind of things you might see in micro-manufacturing in 40, 50 years. And they are actually putting together these incredibly high-tech battle suits very, very rapidly. Well, rapidly for the time. It still takes some hours to put one together, but these are full wearable battle suits, and he gets to see another model of them. These have heavy weapons emplacements on the shoulders, smaller, more almost diminutive legs. The thing is hunched over like a gorilla, but it looks like it is meant to mount, stock, and be a weapons delivery platform, an assault unit. So he's not happy to see that, but he decides he's going to go into the next room, which actually has a door that is somewhat warded against intangible things going through. He has to push through a barrier to get through this door. He manages, but it looks odd. And he finds a room that is deeply troubling. Inside the room, there's a couple of officers dressed in military garb, including a senior officer. And there's a guy who's... the computer's stuff is ringing the entire room, and at the central console, there is a guy who is dressed kind of... He's got a lab coat, his hair is kind of crazed, but he looks like, as I described him, the world's biggest dork. Thin, reedy, but all nervous energy, and he is working on that. But in the center of the room, there's a young boy, about 12 years old. He's in a wheelchair. He's got a colander-type apparatus around his head, and several big shunts going off to wiring that leads up into the computer. This immediately is one of those wrong things. None of the group actually cottons to any kind of things like this happening to children. So once they knew that Smash went to this level, it was open up a door, do it. So that's what happened. Doorman opened a door, Sentinel charged through. Now, Sentinel is good. Very, very good. Weird thing, the officer in this room was actually a little bit faster than he was. Pulled out his gun, aimed, and shot before Sentinel, even Sentinel, could react, which is probably the first time in this entire campaign that's happened. So he didn't hit for any great damage, because even though the gun is energy, it's good against ghosts. You know, he's wearing a battlesuit. it did some damage, but nothing significant. And Sentinel didn't even have his force field up. The battle suit is, they're good. So, although his armor is slagging pretty bad, so that suit is almost cooked. So Sentinel turned around and he started using the battlesuit's anti-personnel weapon, which is basically around the gauntlet there is a flurry of serrated blades, electrified, and toxin. So it's kind of nasty to get hit with, certainly. The guy dodges the worst of it, which is, again, another indication this guy is pretty darn good, not superhuman, just very, very skilled. The other goons try helping out, but by this time the rest of the group is starting to come in. One of the goons gets put down right away with a... Oh no, Sygos tries to use a paralyzing ray, but the guy survives, rolling a 2. My dice weren't always bad through the whole thing. Doorman made one of them vanish, because he's good for that. Bulwark did something that technically wasn't allowable. He started using his his force field punching powers while he was intangible, which is technically not allowed. You have to pay quite a bit to be able to affect things while you're intangible. And the only reason that's even allowed is because technically you're still vulnerable to being attacked by non-kinetic sources, so it's not quite as unfair as, say, being an astral form and attacking normal targets. So, yeah. Anyhow, so he started defending. He aimed a shot at the nerd who was at the computers. When he got hit, he immediately turned around, started entering a rage, and he physically started bulking up. Oh, he's gifted. Pop, pop, pop. Huge muscles. Got ready just to move up and rip and tear. So Dorman went, whisked him away through a door. That didn't work out so well for him. Doorman is a little unfair with his power, but it allows a saving throw, and my dice weren't very good, so that's how it works. So the group was dealing with this colonel, or sorry, the captain. Yeah, dealing with Captain Warford, who was a fierce fighter. He tried. Then Sentinel went and he rolled a critical hit. It was an amazing shot. And he followed it up with an amazing shot himself. Rolled a natural 20 on the turnaround shot. So not only did he slice through the guy's personal armor, but he also knocked the weapon out of his hand and into his own. Warford's response was, wait a minute, this guy's wearing a battle suit. He reached into his utility belt, pulled out a small black box, aimed it, natural 20, broke in his hand. Experimental stuff. At this, he surrendered, as did the remaining fighters that were in the room. There really wasn't much left for them to do, quite honestly. So, at this point, it was, what do you do? So they actually surrendered. Intelligent enemies will surrender, rather than fight to the death needlessly. And the group interrogated them briefly. However, for some reason, Sygos was cranky. Really cranky? Maybe it had something to do with the fact that they were using this kit, which they went to try to free from the machine, and he instantly fainted the moment they detached him. He was able to talk through the computers and told them, yeah, he wanted to be free, but once they disconnected him, it just overloaded him, and he went into a dead faint. So he is still unconscious. Sygos determined that she was done with Warford and tried to move up and zap him with her neural gun. Warford's a skilled fighter. He wasn't just going to be attacked by somebody after he'd surrendered. And he actually threw their hypocrisy of claiming they're American freedom fighters and then trying to attack somebody who's surrendered and is defenseless. Well, again, that was part of what spurred on her desire to shut him up with the neural gun. And he turned around, grabbed her, and because she's not super strong or anything, he held her in a breakneck position and threatened to do it if the rest of them didn't leave, let her alone. And let them go, surrender immediately. Well, Doorman made him vanish too. That's just, I rolled another 18 for a saving throw, so he's gone. So he did kind of save her. But the guard who was left and had surrendered told them that, yeah, he's the guy who could actually have gotten you wherever you needed to go. But the group did take off his utility belt, and they found out they had his secure card. So they were able to go through the base without too much difficulty. The guard also told them that the research and design, because remember, the reason why they went into this base rather than going into one of the lesser bases was largely because the box that Chauffeur had given them that allows him to control devices and control vehicles, they put on one of the battle suits and it didn't allow him to override the control. The battle suit took off and lost them the box. They found it in our research and development when they went down there and again used the door to travel, just as the forces were coming to go after them further. So they kept jumping ahead, basically, of the pursuit of their penetration into the base. So now they were in research and development, and they appeared, again, Dorman unfortunately dropped them right into a live fire range. Sentinel came down, but he was avoided. The group were working on some remote-controlled pilotless battlesuits, actually being remote-controlled by people essentially using something very similar to virtual reality. And there were these Terminator-style battle bots who were blazing down the firing range. Sentinel dodged. Bulwark came out, threw up a force field to block them. And rather than attacking them, they turned and they saw that there were actually 3 pilots who were in booths who were operating them. Sentinel realized, well, they're the weak link and they probably should die. So he took his assault cannon, turned it, and fired a cannon round at them. He rolled amazingly. He rolled a 1, so he avoided the armor blast that was in front of them, which might have dulled the impact, and he arced it. And then his damage rolling sucked, so he did kill one of the pilots, but not the other 2. The other 2 were fine, which kind of had him a little bummed out. He had such an amazing shot, and it all went to just taking out one pilot who wasn't wearing armor, was a combatant at all. Then the incoming fire came, but Dorman threw up a door in front of the rounds that were being fired and opened the other response door above the booths where the pilots were, and the incoming fire killed the pilots. Dorman felt really bad about that. He's not a killer. He doesn't like using his powers for that. As a matter of fact, he has one of those nice powers that can allow him to just, you're gone somewhere else. He can send them 2 miles away so they're out of a fight. So unless somebody can really travel fast, that's pretty much it for the fight for them. But in this case, he, as a reflex, basically just blocked the incoming fire and directed it so that they took themselves down. The group actually harvested the battle guns from one of the robotic suits. The energy blaster allows rapid fire without worrying about ammo. It's got a huge ammo capacity. And they also took a multi-barreled Gatling-style grenade launcher. Just for shredding armor, really. So, they had a couple of choices for rooms out of there. They were in the research and development area, but a couple of the different labs that appealed to them were ones for experimental objects and another one for occult. At this point, they were pretty sure that something shady was going on with the occult. They knew there was something wrong because of all the ghosts and things that they'd been seeing. This isn't normal, so they wanted to get to the bottom of this. First of all, they went to the experimental area because they wanted to find the box, which they found. They also found there's a number of items that Smash has been basically collecting and consolidated here. How did they find that out? Because there were only 2 people in. One was a lead researcher and the other one was his assistant. They found out the lead researcher was actually feeding the soul of his assistant to this mirror and studying what was happening. They didn't like that at all. So Doorman opened up a door and vanished the assistant, and they pummeled the researcher. Then they started trying to do some research, or at least Bulwark started trying to do some research and find out what was stealable from here, despite the box, which they recovered. And he, again, rolled a natural 20, so he accidentally deleted the records of the lead researcher. He redeemed himself when he checked out the files for the assistant. which were actually fairly concise and allowed him to get a couple of choice items which might help them out in the future. One of them is a weapon. One of them is the ability to basically desolidify doors and walls. So, you know, he found some interesting things. The others went over to investigate the door marked Occult Lab. Now, they found out something very interesting. The security door, and the captain's security card did not open it. The security password was only the general in charge of the entire base could breach that during an alert. So, they really started to wonder. Now, of course, Sentinel had battlesuit syndrome, where everything is breakable if I'm in a battlesuit. But he determined he wasn't going to smash down the door because that might actually be sealing something in. So they had Doorman create a door on one side and a door on the other side. Despite the fact that he was trying to rest, they only had about 10 minutes worth of rest because the base is still on alert. There are still people looking for them. So he created a door, and he found out that the space on the other side of the door was sticky. It didn't want to allow the portal, but he managed to make it. He survived the big penalty that he had to do it. And Sentinel poked his head through. Kind of wished that he hadn't, because in this large room that was completely clear, there were runes on the walls in blood. Fresh. Smelled bloody, too. There's a person in a just short sleeve shirt. Looked like he was early 30s, kind of receding hairline. He was in a lotus position, but he was glowing with red light. There was a ghost of a man, looked like a Eastern European man, a little on the portly side, large beard, mustache, with a large wrench over his shoulder. They could see through. He was a ghost. And then there was this other guy in a lab coat who was busy pulling his own skin off. He had already gotten almost all of it off of his face and his arms. He was starting to pick up his arms. They were pretty squicked out. And when Sentinel ran a scan through the room, the only one who was alive was the man in the lotus position. The other guy was dead, even though he was pulling himself to pieces, and the ghost was a ghost. So they looked around, and they're like, what should we do? The group was kind of... Psyghost was like, kill everything, because that's Psyghost tonight. And the group's like, we don't know that he's bad. We don't know anything about what's going on there. So they dialed back the bloodlust a little bit, and they're like, let's just leave this room. It's okay. We'll come back if we need to, but right now we don't know enough to do anything here. There's no computers in that room. There's no files that we can see. Let's just let whatever's in there stay trapped in there. So they got out. More than just the group, though. Because when they came out, the ghost with the pipe wrench rose up out of the ground in front of Sentinel and said, You are the one who will cause the people to rise up against the oppressors. You will give the call. You will set them free. You will help them to free themselves. And then he vanished from sight. Sentinel's like, okay. The rest of the group is like, oh. So, at this point, they're like, okay, look, there's not much we can do here. We've blown up some of the battlesuit creation stuff. We don't have enough to blow up the entire thing. We could try to do the power surge thing, but we'd have to get down to the power generators, which are below the base. So that's probably the next place we really have to go. They also got a run-in with Hank DeVille. He had left the battlesuit. He was not following them anymore, but what he had done was go off, and he basically got an officer's uniform, and he was giving conflicting orders. Because while they were in the lab, a door opened and a couple of battlesuits came in and started attacking. They weathered the initial attack. One of the battlesuits got teleported away by Doorman. And while they had returned fire and damaged the first one, Psyghost had a rippling power or mental blast at him. Finding out that some of these suits are actually resistant to give a little bit of armor from the psychic sense to the operators. They heard from behind, there's one of them! That's one of the stolen suits! Get him! And about 3 battle suits worth of firepower ripped into the back of the one that was attacking them, which dropped him quick. And they heard, All right. They must have split up. You go and search for them. And then he dismissed the other battle suits, and out comes Hank. He's like, well, you know, I'm causing chaos. And they're like, oh, well, it's good to see you. So Hank decided, I'm still going to stick around and keep throwing them off the trail, but you're gonna have to hurry. Things are getting kind of bad. They're like, yeah, we need to get down to the power center. He's like, okay, well, I've done reconnoitering, and I took some pictures of the layout of the place, so here, have my phone. They looked at the phone, Hank took off, and they're looking at the phone, and they're like, oh, okay, well, down below is the power center, and there's 3 sections to the power center. One of them is N, labeled Class N, one of them is Class C, and one of them is Class G. They're like, gee, ghosts! Sure, let's go stop that, because that sounds like the most horrible thing, and we need to stop it. So, Doorman opens up a portal. He rolls quite well. He gets them right into that room. They come out, and this place makes them all get the willies really quickly. It's cold in here. Their breath is instantly freezing. It's a large concrete bunker, kind of like an abandoned subway station. Large towering ceiling, large empty area, but the air just seems to be swirling of its own. There are 4 candle holders in each of the corners of the room, which are glowing with what looks like a black flame. At the end of the room, opposite them, is a large altar. And it's covered with all kinds of occult symbols they can recognize, and immediately sets them on edge. There's a number of people who are dressed up as cultists with black body armor on. They are wearing purple robes. They have various sacrificial things, and their high priest has just dipped into a bowl and pulled something bloody out of it. They're really creeped out at this. And there's huge purple crystal pillars rising up floor to ceiling on either side of them that they recognize are crackling with energy. Some sort of power transmutation conduit or something. Okay. Well, this is pretty classic evil, shut down the evil cultist thing, so their instincts took over. And Sentinel, of course, goes first, and he turns and he empties his newfound grenade launcher at one of the pillars and shreds it, blows it up. Now, the cultists recognized when the players came in. There was enough resonance that when they came in, all the cultists looked up. Some of them kind of dipped down and they dipped their hands into fire, which looked like they were getting ready to throw at the group. The high priest had a knife that was crackling with red arcane energy. The others had various weapons. The explosion pitched several of the cultists away, knocked several out. One unlucky soul rolled really poorly with his attempt to roll with a roll natural 20. He dropped to the ground, and as the group kind of saw in horror, a crack appeared in the ground, and 2 black shadowy hands reached up through the crack, reached into his mouth, and pulled something out. Yes, he got desouled in front of them. Into the crack, and the crack just sealed up. The group's like, oh, dang. But they're evil people, and they kind of asked for it, so the group didn't feel too terrible about their next actions. So the group started taking some attacks from the cultists. The red knife is able to send out arcane lightning bolts, which hit Sentinel, did not do any damage to him. So bad. The damage dice were so bad. And Doorman took a shot. But an interesting thing about that, while the bolts hit him and clearly hurt him somewhat, Doorman's a pretty decent guy, and apparently his innate decency and relative lack of aggression warded him against some of the damage that they were doing. The emotion attack, basically, would turn their aggressive tendencies against each other. So Cygos could have been in a lot of trouble. Bulwark could have been in a fair amount of trouble. Doorman, just a guy, didn't want to really get into any fights. He's trying to avoid fighting wherever possible, so he weathered the attack much better than most of the others would have. But Sentinel turned his blaster gun because he ran out of ammo for the grenade launcher. He fired it all in one shot, which was very impressive, but ammo issues. So he turned and started firing the blaster at the other pillar. And while it created some energy cascades, did not blow it up the way he was hoping it would. As a matter of fact, some of the energy looked like it got absorbed into the pillar. So he was not as pleased with that result. The group was firing back and trying to disable cultists that were still fighting. Bulwark did nothing but put up his force field and protect the boy. They had, yes, brought the boy along with them. So he's in the wheelchair. Bulwark is standing in front of him with his force field, protecting him with his body. This is something Bulwark is very good at doing. As far as I know, he didn't even have his density up at the time. He was just ready. So it was up to Cyghost blasting away. At this point, one of the cultists flaked badly. He took out his assault rifle, shot the knees of several of the other cultists, screamed out, "I give them to you!" and tried running away. Cyghost folded him in half with a power blast and knocked him out, so didn't do him any good, but at least he didn't die when the other pillar went. Doorman did something that was a bit of a stretch for his character. He opened up a doorway into the chamber below where all this darkness was. And he actually allowed 2 hungry ghosts to come through, which menaced the 2 remaining cultists. The one with the hands of fire, actually the hungry ghost turned around and de-souled him as well. Reached around him and just pulled his soul out through his head. Pretty grisly, but then it darted back with its stolen soul into the door. The other one started going mano a mano with the High Priest. It seemed to be afraid of his dagger, however, crackling with psychic energy as it was, and it knew that he could hurt it. However, with the next salvo, which I believe came from the cannon arm of the battlesuit Sentinel was wearing, he sheared the pillar. His ability to take 2 attacks every round really does give him a huge tactical advantage. And again, if I'm going to lever any criticism, the cost of that power is so trivial for what it does for a fight that they really need to rebalance this game terribly. Between duplication and that, it just, I don't think they consider how dynamic that affects situations, or can affect situations. So he sheared the last pillar. The final explosion did not hurt the priest, but it did banish the hungry ghost. So the priest turns around and ha-ha! Well, that didn't work out very well, because the rest of the group now could consolidate fire on him. He was the only lone combatant, and while he had protection and cover from the pillar, well, this is another opportunity for Sentinel to roll amazingly to hit. Got him in the face with his blaster, and then rolled really bad damage. So he didn't kill the priest, didn't even knock him out, but did injure him pretty badly. The follow-up shot did, however, flatten him. So I believe could have been Cyghost. I confess there's a hole in my memory, so I trust that if any of you listen to this and you are the one who actually finished the High Priest, go ahead and put it down. But they eventually shut down all the cultists. Bulwark started knocking the candles down, so those were gone. They did feel that after those priests were gone, the air in the room got a lot calmer, although it was still cold. They definitely still felt on edge from being in the room, but they feel that the worst profanities in the room have been laid to rest. As a quick addendum, the group looked into the altar itself as the last thing that they did in the night, and found out that on top of all of the blasphemous occult nonsense that was all over it, they also found a number of technological devices that were wrapped around the structure of the altar. This offended Sentinel, and he smashed it. He smashed it hard. His battlesuit was able to crack the technological webbing, which immediately exposed him to a blast of occult energy. This occult energy he didn't handle very well, and it flowed through his body, through the suit and through him. Basically what it did is it scrambled him pretty badly. He lost his ability to enter super speed, so no multiple attacks. But on the other hand, he learned how to basically take his soul out of his body and replicate himself. In other words, he picked up the power duplication at its lowest level of effect. And he picked up a psychosis. He every once in a while will get trapped in the mindset of one of these poor native Georgians who were brutally repressed by the Russian communist regime when they had taken over. All in all, a bit unpleasant, but it's a new occult tie-in, and he can now explore occult avenues for increasing or spreading out with his powers. So that was where we ended off. So that is my State of the Dungeon address. Thank you very much, and until next time, have fun, play games, roll dice. Thank you. Farewell.